Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to passage number 11 of Song of the Open Road. This is one of the more personal parts of Song of the Open Road. The word "you" will get used 15 times in this set of 9 lines. That's significant. Now, my assumption is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down the left-hand side, Talks with Walt is our playlist. And that you've been working with us everything from inscriptions all the way up through Open Road, already passage 10. We've been giving individual archive thoughts on each one of these. As we now turn to passage 11, and it's such a fascinating passage because of the intimacy and the rebelliousness, the iconoclasm that will be a part of this. Right away, we're already going to be playing around with some echoes. Hey, I'd like to take you back to our Song of Myself, passage number 4, just for a few seconds. Do you guys remember this set of lines? We've already talked about them in detail, but I'll play around with them nonetheless. Apart from the pulling and hauling stands what I am. Stands amused, complacent, compassionating, idle, unitary, looks down, is erect, or bends an arm on an impalpable certain rest, looking with side-curved head, curious what will come next, both in and out of the game, and watching and wondering at it. Backward I see in my own days where I sweated through fog with linguistics and contenders. I have no mockings or arguments. I witness and wait. You'll remember that I argue that this may be one of the central sets of lines in all of Leaves of Grass. Certainly, I think we'll come back to it now as we prepare to read Song of Myself, passage 11. He begins with the word listen, which will remind us, of course, of starting from Paumanok, passage 9, listen, dear son, right? Listen, I'll be honest with you. I do not offer the old, smooth prizes, but offer rough, new prizes. These are the days that must happen to you. You shall not heap up what is called riches. You shall scatter with lavish hand all that you earn or achieve. You but arrive at the city to which you were destined. You hardly settle yourself to satisfaction before you're called by an irresistible call to depart. You shall be treated to the ironical smiles and mockings of those who remain behind you. What beckonings of love you receive, you shall only answer with passion and kisses of parting. You shall not allow the hold of those who spread their reached hands toward you. Now here, of course, we have Whitman the person in our 5 Ps. Whitman the Iconoclast. Whitman at times the discouraged and rejected poet. And he'll play that game now to include and invite you as a would-be traveler with him. And he begins by saying, I'm going to be honest with you. Now, I borrowed heavily in my thoughts here from the great Harold Bloom, who will point out many times in his illustrious career at Yale how often Whitman promises what Whitman will never deliver. That is to say, honesty. And ironically, he'll say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to say some things to you that are really important. And yet we wonder about ever Whitman and his honesty, right? That is to say, he's going to say now, I do not offer, that is to say, in my journey with you, and in my promises to you, I do not offer the old smooth prizes. You'll maybe remember this word smooth in Are You the New Person, as he will share that word smooth prizes, but offer rough, new prizes. This rough, of course, will remind us of passage 5 of Song of Myself, rough. By the way, this is the only time in all of Leaves of Grass that the word prizes actually gets used in this way. Only time. Notice what he's saying. I'm not going to offer you anything slick, anything smooth, these smooth prizes. That is to say, stuff that's already been accepted. Maybe we would argue cliched knowledge and the like. But rather, I'm going to offer you the rough, new prizes. Now, rough here carries with it so many different meanings in our study of Leaves of Grass, right? Notice, for example, we can talk about rough as in uncultured, rough as in unexplored, rough as in unknown. Of course, in America, rough is everything from the Mississippi West, of course, right? In other words, I'm not going to offer you a project that's simple, that is easy. And we obviously go back to Song of Myself, passage 46, to be reminded that he's already played this game. And then the next line will for sure remind us of passage 46 of Song of Myself. These are the days that must happen to you. And then you've got the colon there. And he's simply not going to list what this looks like. I love this because in his invitation to us as students of his text, he's going to try to be as direct and as honest with us about what it's like to be a real student, the days that must happen to you. That is to say, if you go on this journey with Whitman, we've seen this already in our reading of Leaves of Grass, there will be challenges that will be difficult. He will say it this way: you shall not heap up what is called riches. You'll remember it starting from Paumanok, passage 12, he said, I will make the true poem of riches. It's ironic, as we pointed out in our study there in Paumanok, that Whitman never made much money in his lifetime from this collection of poems that we call Leaves of Grass. In fact, quite the opposite. He lived relatively kind of from paycheck to paycheck, we might call it today. He was not a wealthy man in his lifetime at all, and so he'll say it out loud. I'm not going to promise you wealth. You're not going to heap up a bunch of money. This use of the word heap is a fascinating word as well. You can run into ground. And then he uses the word scatter and makes us immediately think of passage 5 of Song of the Open Road. And obviously seeds and spreading seeds and the like is part of this. You will scatter with lavish hand all that you can earn or achieve. In other words, he says, I'm going to challenge you to throw away the traditionally accepted prizes, and I'm going to challenge you to go for the heart of the matter. It's a compelling idea, especially for us as students. You but arrive at the city. Think of his passage 46 about cities and free nations we shall fetch as we go. You will arrive at the city to which you were destined. You hardly settle yourself to satisfaction. And of course that word satisfaction is a fascinating word, given what he's already said about don't take the easy stuff, the smooth stuff, before you're called by an irresistible call to depart. This idea of never being satisfied. Whitman himself was very much like this. I mean, we said this in our introductory lectures about him, right? So he starts out, you know, as a teacher and then as a journalist, and he never can quite find that satisfaction that he longs for, and ultimately I think he found as poet. And so this idea of the city can become here kind of symbolic, that you find the thing that you feel comfortable with, and then all of a sudden you're no longer comfortable. Now obviously we have to think about Homer's Odyssey and the way that Odysseus will spend his 2 years with Circe and then gotta go. Or of course his 7 years with Calypso and gotta go. This notion that there's always more to be explored, there's always more to be traveled, will be foundational. You shall be treated, now obviously this is just pure. In some ways I think this is Whitman being honest, because I think he does tell us this is what his life was like much of the time. You shall be treated to the ironical smiles and mockings of those who remain behind you. Of course, this is why we started with mockings. This is why we started with Song of Myself, passage 4. You'll remember the word mocking there. The ironical, by the way, use of that word, Song of the Answer, it's the ironical echoes. When we get there, we'll point it out again. The ironical smiles is something that Whitman had to have dealt with a whole bunch in his life. He was thoroughly convinced that we would be having this conversation that we call Talks with Walt. He knew it. He was absolutely certain about it. But when he said it out loud, most people kind of looked at him askance like, yeah, right, whatever. I mean, nobody's even reading your poems today. How are they going to be reading them in 200 plus years? It's insane to imagine it. And yet, of course, here we are, right, playing the game. Whitman somewhere is saying, I told you so, right? That notion as well of you're going to be treated to these ironical smiles and mockings of those who remain behind you. We have to think about Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance, so influential, I think, for Whitman, especially in this passage. To be great is to be, what does he say, misunderstood, right? In other words, there's no way, if you want to be accepted by the larger herd, there's no way that you're ever going to be able to take this journey with Whitman, he says. And then, what beckonings of love you receive, and here we immediately think of the ideas that stand behind so much of Whitman and his sexuality. What beckonings of love you receive, you shall only answer with a passion and kisses of parting. Go back to Song of Myself again, passage 46. I kiss you with a goodbye kiss and set you on your egress hence, right? Of parting, you shall not allow the hold of those who spread their reached hands toward you. Now, this use of the word hold is fascinating because I've pointed this out before already in our study of Song of Myself. Sometimes hold or grasping or seizing will be a positive, kind of thing. And then here it is a negative thing. We, of course, have to think about our Declaration of Independence, a text that Whitman loved so much. And you'll remember that Tom Jefferson says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary that when peoples dissolve the political bands, this idea of holding or bands, that which tied you down, have to think about Gulliver being tied down by the Lilliputians. Here, you shall not allow the hold of those who spread their reached hands toward you, people who are reaching out to try and keep you, holding you down, keeping you from the thing that you want to do. And of course here we'll begin at 2a with these messages. True learning always means, of course, in the end, going your own way. That's why we say we are the stories we tell, we're the stories we retell. Remember, we also say in 303, you're the stories that you decide to accept or to reject. And of course that rejection of a story is a really profound moment in the life. I mean, we can go back to Joyce and his idea of the epiphany, right? Think about the young man in Portrait of the Artist as the Young Man, as we've commented elsewhere in lectures at learnstrong.net. At 2b, I love this language of intimacy and the language of warning and the language of, hey, come here, I've got something I really got to tell you. Listen to me for a second. It's as if the poem now has become deeply personal, intimate, and he will say to you, no matter what you've enjoyed with intimacy, you're going to end up having to leave and keep going, keep going. I also have this sense that he's almost as if Walt Whitman himself is saying, you can only take what I'm doing in Leaves of Grass so far, and then you got to go out and you got to do your own thing. And we'll certainly play that game by passage 15 of Song of Myself as we finish. At 3a, I mentioned Emerson and self-reliance comes to mind. Of course, think about Thoreau and marching to the beat of your own drum and all of that as well. I like to think of Emily Dickinson, Much Madness is Divine Ascents to the Discerning Eye. We've given a lecture on that poem, but think about the point that she makes. 'Tis the majority as all in this, right? If you are willing to assent, you're accepted. If you demur, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. And I think Dickinson understood that probably as well as Whitman, that there's so often an inability for people to be able to appreciate the genius that was their poetry. I would say even today this is the case, right? Many people have not actually read much of Leaves of Grass for this very reason, the ironical smiles that he points out. Speaking of, at 3b, how are you going to own a passage like this? Well, I can ask you, what's a time that you refused to be held back by reaching hands? You had to go your own way. Think about that word picture of the crabs in the bucket, and one crab almost gets out, and then of course one reaches up to grab. It's kind of a famous word picture about how you can be held back. What was a time that you had to endure ironical smiles? People that looked at you like, yeah, right. I had a student that told her parents, I'm going to college. And they said, no one in our family's ever been to college. And they laughed at her, and they said, you can't afford it anyway. And of course, her graduation from the university was a monumental moment in the history of the family. And she had to say it out loud. I had to overcome all of those ironical smiles of, you're never going to get there. You're never going to be able to do that. Whitman obviously knew that one well. Finally, to own this poem, I'd love to ask this question from this line because it's such a beautiful line again, right? He says, you but arrive in the city to which you're destined. You'll hardly settle yourself to satisfaction before you're called by an irresistible call to depart. I'll ask you this in conclusion. What is for you an irresistible call? That is to say, you just cannot avoid it. You have to keep going. I hope that our study of Leaves of Grass is that for you. I know it is certainly for me. Thank you.